Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. I've got Emily Kund with us, and I'm just going to do a few housekeeping things. Number one, we're being recorded, so you're all good. You can come back and listen to all the great things that we talk about as many times as you want. Also, we're not doing Q&A, but we are collecting it. So there's a section below the videos here where you could put anything in, and Emily and I will do our best to answer those questions later, because we absolutely want to spend as much time picking her brain as we can. So, Emily, thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Now, remember, she's on the other side here because she runs her own podcast. So at some point, I guess she'll return the favor and have me on the other side and put me through my paces as well. So
Yeah.
I welcome the opportunity. So we're just going to jump right in.
Let's do it.
All right. So now I know that you're into martial arts, and actually people could probably see one of your trophies just like up in the corner there of your window, I think. So I was wondering, could you just tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And I am super excited to be here and share kind of what knowledge I have with y'all. So I got into martial arts because I was looking for my next challenge, my next fitness related challenge. I had run long distances, so I'd run half marathons. I've been a fitness competitor, which required so much work. My health in my body at that point wasn't able to let me go back and compete on stage. And so I thought about what else could I do. And my son had been taking martial arts. In fact, he just had his official promotion ceremony on Saturday and is a black belt now. So
Wow.
I've seen my son go through it, and I was like, well, maybe this is something that I could do. And I will tell you, it is one of the most humbling things I have ever done because of just the amount of knowledge, understanding why certain moves are a certain way. Um, Even just how I remember kind of when I joined back in November of 2018 and how I interacted with the instructors. Because like my background is a bank examiner. So when I talk to people higher than me, I call them by their first name because I am there, like I am on their level. Like as a bank examiner, I was on the level with the president and the CEO, the chairman. So, so it was really hard for me to kind of step back and have this hierarchy of show. And it wasn't so much about showing respect. It was I, I am worth something. Like we can have a conversation. We're both adults, but having to go back and really have that hierarchy. Being really humbled by messing up in front of kids who are 7, 8, 9. And here I stroll in at age 41 at that time, and I'm like, I'm messing up in front of kids, and they're trying to teach me. That's very humbling, but I'm sticking with it. And um, I am an orange belt now, and probably next month I will test for my orange belt one stripe, I think it is. So I've got another few years before I can test for black belt.
That's awesome. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's actually probably fits people who are in our field, even because there's so much discipline involved. And I think analytics requires a level of discipline too. And then now I think martial arts also requires you to also develop quick reflexes to the extent that
Yes.
you can, at at our ages now. But now,
Yeah.
so thinking about that idea of being quick, is there something you can talk about, recommend to our audience that you think they can act on quickly from your experience in analytics and visualization, something that maybe they could do in a week?
So yeah, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is really around perspective. And so whatever you build or whatever you're communicating, seeing that through the lens of the person on the other end. Right? Because sometimes we build dashboards that based on our design approach, based on what um, what we think is important. So really think, and even just that kind of user experience of the dashboard, like we've developed a style ourselves. And so thinking about on the other side, how would somebody else, how is my intended user, how are they going to interact with this? Do they know where to start? Do they know what button to click? I mean, especially in an organization where uh, the tool, I use Tableau, but where Tableau might be new, I've seen that where people are like, all they need to do is like read and click a filter. So it's like not that big of a deal, but they're like, I don't want to break it.
Mhm.
Like, what do I don't know what to
Mm.
do. So being directive with your language instead of region, how about choose a region? Or select a region, like
Mm.
those little things to really help with that user experience. And that's what I'm really talking about when I say look on the other side, how somebody would interact and respond. Because we've been doing this for a lot of us have been doing this for so long that it's
Sure.
like second nature. Um, but if we think about the audience on the other side, that I think can really help the reports and the analytics be really meaningful.
Yeah, I think that idea of being also more active, right, than passive. And I always err on the side of being as specific as possible, not to sit there and write out long lists of instructions, because I think that's bad because you don't want to burden people with, but having
Right.
to do that. And that probably also means you should do a different design if you have to have so much there to explain what to do, right? Because there's a
Yeah.
tendency to, oh, well, they'll just read everything. I'm like, no, people are lazy.
No.
They don't
Um,
like to read.
I actually told I was teaching last week, so I teach data visualization, and I was teaching last week and said, data visualization's kind of like a joke. The more you need to explain it, the less effective it becomes. Um, and
Hmm.
I was like, oh, that really fits because the more text you need to put in there, it may mean the less effective that visualization is. So yeah, really being really crisp and clean with our direction, with our words, because really people just want to get, I think, to the point of what we're trying to convey with as least amount of clicks and noise as possible.
Yeah, I think that I I have a similar philosophy that the goal is to actually read the visualization for the least amount of time possible, unless you need to read it more, right? Which basically means I should look at it, get out of it what I want. And if I need to dig in, then I will go
Yeah.
deeper and spend the time with it. But I should be able to really just get everything. And
Yeah.
I think on that user experience side, I always think that the competition for the other person's mind is, well, this is in a browser, so why doesn't it work just like Facebook and Amazon and Netflix? And right, that's who they're thinking about. They don't care that it's Tableau or Power
Yeah.
BI, whatever, and they shouldn't care. They shouldn't even have to know,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And um, one of the things that I talk about it slightly differently depending on what business I'm working in, whether it's for my online coaches or for my data visualization training. But I'm really big on this concept of knowing your audience, knowing who your ideal client for my online coaches and that space,
Hmm.
but knowing who your audience is. So I agree. Like for if
Looks like she might be having some trouble with her internet, so we'll give her a minute to come back. There we go.
Hello? I had to reload
Hi.
the site.
Yeah.
Oh, technology.
All right. All right. Well, let's keep going because I want to get to some of the other questions. So I know we didn't get to
Okay,
completely finish the thought there, but welcome back.
thanks.
Next time I'm going to have something better prepared to fill in if that happens again. You never can prepare enough, I guess. All right. So
Yeah.
now you and I are both consultants, and I know that I certainly come into times when I have to push my clients out of their comfort zone. So I'm guessing, you kind of have those situations as well. So can you talk about a time when you knew what they needed, that they were really uncomfortable, and how that you think can apply to the world of analytics? So maybe it wasn't even a situation that was analytic related, but could translate to what we do. So kind of what was the concern? What did you do? And then how did everybody feel at the end?
Yeah, so I think for this example, I want to share one from one of my other business, which is working with online coaches for lead generation, customer engagement, and retention quizzes. So I had a client who wanted to do a quiz to build their email and their text list. And we've been working along. And then she said, hey, I spoke to my business coach, who was also previously one of my coaches.
Oh.
And she said, and she wants me to put a link to my master class that she was going to charge like $97 for. And I wanted to put that in my call to action on the results page. And so this was a little awkward because in her mind and in her business coach's mind, what they wanted was to be able to use this as a way to sell something. So I had to step in and say, listen, that's not the best course of action. And I used it as an example to teach why. So, and how she can get to the same point and really explain. So a lot of times what I'll do in those situations is I'll use it as an educational experience, whether that was when I did reporting and analytics in the public sector and working with a senior advisor, or in this particular case, working on this quiz. And so I shared with her why I do not advocate for selling in a quiz, how she could do it. It was awkward because she's like, well, I hear what you're saying, but this coach is telling me, and I'm like, with all due respect, these are the industry practices. And think about how, again, going back to that quick action skill of that perspective shift on, the person on the other end. Think about how the person on the other end of the quiz feels. Like, right? Like this may be their first touch point with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't know you, and then you're asking them, they've taken a quiz, they've gotten their result, and now you're saying, hey, buy my $97 masterclass. I think you can sell to them in a different way, like through email. But really, it's all about value and nurturing at this point. So talked about kind of why that was not an approach that was best practice and why I don't advocate or do it. I did say ultimately, I don't recommend this. However, if you are insistent, I will put it in there, but I don't expect that it would convert very well. And at the end of the day, she ended up going with my recommendation to leave the selling part out of it, which I think is great. Because again, like it's not going to convert very well. Mm-hmm. And I want this to be successful for her. So it was a little awkward because she has a very successful coach. And so she was hearing two different things.
Sure.
And then she had to think about what is the best choice. And that's where I just put the information out there, and then she can make the decision. But then she needs to take personal accountability for whatever action happens. So at the end of the day, it worked out fine, but it was awkward.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, because I think a lot of people deal with that situation in our world. I'll use this as, your customer, whoever it might be, could be a peer, your boss, whomever, could be an external customer even, and you're doing some type of analytics work. And this is the typical, well, I want an fill in the blank chart, right? Yeah. I want a pie chart. I want a this chart, right? I want a whatever the fanciest thing I just saw, right? That's what I want. And you're sitting there going, yeah, that's a really bad idea. That's what's in your head, and maybe it comes out of your mouth, but and so then you get into the thing like, well, that road of going to say, here's all the reasons why that's a bad idea, right? Can sometimes be very difficult because now you're getting into this very defensive mode. Not that you're necessarily defensive, but you're trying to defend a certain reasoning, right? And it's very hard. And so I think what you just said about trying to lay out the information, maybe trying to lay out some choices, right?
Yeah.
And then getting that person to recognize also in the end, though, I think that's the hardest part for people like us who are practitioners. Like, you may say to me, do this, and that's what I want, and you're not going to take accountability. Something's going to go wrong. Let's say something goes wrong, somebody reads it wrong or makes a bad decision. They're still pointing the finger at me. You can't say, oh, well, Emily decided she wanted the pie chart, right? That just never, and you don't usually step in and say, oh, well, I told Lee to make the pie chart. That was all on me. I mean, I'm sure occasionally it happens, but I think that's a tough situation that we really do face a lot.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, the way I approach things, this is just natural for me. What is the objective? Like, what is the objective of our work here? Whether it's the quiz or the dashboard or whatever. Because if the objective is to convey information about risk and the highest risk, then how do our actions that you want to take, how does that align with the objective? And so, look, I know at the end of the day, because I've had the pie chart conversation, like, I get it. Like, we're going to have to do sometimes things that we wouldn't do as a course of best practice or good practice. And we sometimes just need to do it, right? But I always think about the long game. What is the long game here? Okay, so I've educated them. If they don't take my advice, they at least have heard it, and maybe they need to hear it again, or maybe they can use that. And I'm always thinking about how could they use this information for their own benefit, right? So if they are in a meeting and somebody talks about like this report or this dashboard, they can then step up and say, oh, hey, by the way, I've been reading or I've been learning all about this, and I know that this is the best way to do that. So that actually makes them look really good. So it may be a long game, but I think having that information out there, and then kind of what's the objective and kind of how can we work towards that? And now this is more for my coaches than others, like in corporate, but it's about connection. It's about conveying information. And so how do you want people to feel at the end of your work? And for the quiz, how do you want people to feel? Do you want them to feel like you're trying to take advantage of them? And so think about that as well. So how do you want that end user to feel?
Yeah, I think that those are great things for people to remember. And it ties back to this whole idea of user experience, being on the other side. And a lot of times we have different pressures we have to deal with. So a lot of those things can get lost. So I think hearing them again and having you emphasize that is good. Now, having gone through these last couple of questions, I'm curious to see how you're going to answer this last one. All right. Now, many of you may not know that Emily has been a Tableau ambassador for many years. I'm thinking at least 5. I probably could be more, and that's a great honor. So I was fortunate enough to also be an ambassador for many years. So I continue to congratulate you on that. But now as an ambassador, let's imagine, really use your imagination here, that you are bestowed one wish for everyone who works in the field of data visualization or analytics, whatever you want to think about. You get that one wish, and whatever you wish will come true. Now remember, with great power comes great responsibility. So what one skill would you wish for everyone?
This one is really tough because there were 2 that popped out at me. But I will go with really strong communication skills. I think that, so like my personal opinion
that choice,
is,
by the way. That's a great one.
Thank you. I mean, I truly believe that data visualization is just another form of communication. And I think we need to be able to effectively communicate, not only getting information from the client or the manager or whomever, in order to build the dashboard, but we also need to be able to communicate it out and present it, and be able to answer the questions. So I really feel like communication won out over my other skill I was going to choose.
So let's talk about communication a bit there. So when you say it's just
Okay.
another form of communication, that sounds good as an idea, but hard in practice. So if we take that a little further, so if you kind of break that down and say, okay, well, I wish for them to have better communication, what does that really mean? What are some things that I can do to be a better communicator in this field?
Right. So I think part of it, like from a very tactical perspective,
Yeah.
I think part of it is being able to effectively get the requirements, the objective of the dashboard or whatever the thing is that we're building. So on the front end, being able to elicit those requirements so that way we know exactly instead of just guessing, and putting something out there. I know it's so easy to iterate, but it's also super nice to be able to nail a dashboard because you understand what the objective is and how it's going to be used and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So on the front end, I think it's, being able to get those requirements, sitting down, talking with the people, if you don't already know, talking with people who will use this to understand exactly how it will be used, what kind of design that they like. So on that side, on the front end, getting the information. And then
I'm curious, do you have a special way of, like, without giving any of your secret sauce away, do you have any particular questions or way of going about asking them? Because it's more than, well, what do you want, right? Because
right.
when we know that that's kind of the past, right? And they just give you a list of stuff and they probably want something else or need something different than what they want. So do you have a way to kind of maneuver around that people might give a try to do differently?
So I'll lean on my experience as a reporting and analytics manager because I don't do traditional data visualization consulting. So as a reporting and analytics manager, as somebody who was preparing and seeing kind of my past failures and lessons learned, it really truly is what I really need to know. What is the objective? What are we really trying to do with this dashboard? Who is going to be using it? And then the design, what I call the design stuff, but the style, that is something that I either know because I've worked with them or I call myself bar chart Betty because I just use a lot of bar charts because they're very effective. I learned my lesson on trying to sauce it up, spice it up with a circle chart, and that was just horrendous. So, I think that those are like two primary questions that I ask, and I think every consultant asks that type of question. So I don't have any specific advice there, but understanding who is using this, how it will be used, what decisions, just understanding that piece of it so that you can build out something that's really helpful, and to the end user.
I think those are good points, and probably many people who are consultants ask those questions in a similar way. But I think people who might be more, doing the work in a corporation may not, or it might be going back to the whole comfort zone thing. Just even asking what seems like a typical harmless question might just be difficult because they're not expected to ask questions. People are expected to do what's been asked of them, right? And so going back, to we talked about that before. But I also like the, I want to make a quick point and get your thought on this before we close out. You made a comment about, oh, we can iterate, but it's nice to nail it. And I think that's so important because I'll quote my dad. He used to tell me, people seem to have enough time to do it over again, but not time to do it the right way the first time.
Right.
It always stuck with me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about, yes, it's easy for us to iterate, but think about your user. Like, that's just another meeting that they're going to have, or more time that they're going to need to review. So if you can get some of that upfront information, that can help you in the future, or help them really in the future. So yeah, I fully believe that. The other thing too that I want to just mention when it comes to communication is that I really think it's an opportunity for people to really stand in their power, to stand as an authority when they're educating or when they're asking these questions. Because you're right, a lot of people are just like, well, you build the thing, like just put it in Tableau, or just put it in the tool, or just build it, right? But asking questions, I think, can also help demonstrate our level of proficiency as an authority and as an expert.
Great point.
Because when managers come to us and say, as they did with this big tool that I built out using Tableau, but when they come to us and say, we want all of this stuff, like, that was an opportunity for me. If I had really stood in my power as an expert, which I knew more about Tableau and data visualization than they did, so therefore I was the expert in that situation, to say, I understand, like, we can go all over the place, but here's what we need to do. We need to focus. And why don't we try this in a phased approach? And why don't we try just doing a visualization on the highest priority first? You can even hear it in my voice that I am coming across with a posture of certainty. And so I also, when it comes to communication, I think that it's an opportunity to demonstrate your proficiency, to be the expert, because then you are a valuable asset, not just a builder, but you are an asset to the organization.
Yeah, you're acting more as a consultant than just, and that's a switch I think people will have to make over time, is be more consultative. That's just a legacy thing that people in analytics and BI are going to have to get over. I think it's making the shift. So I really like that, though, is making sure you portray and project that, not in a kind of condescending way, right? Because then people will be like, right, forget that. That's not going to work. But just in a way that puts you out there as the expert, and try to not get into that defensive kind of thing where you have to, you don't want to do that either. I think those are all great points that people could really use in this notion of communications. And I think if you put yourself in the mindset that this is communications and think of it that way, you will perceive data visualization in a different way. I mean, that's a whole nother topic that we could get into. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I think about all day, because I think about it, as you do, as a means of communications. So on that note, being mindful of our own communications with our and promise to the audience, I'm going to wrap up. Thanks so much again for all the great ideas and things that our listeners can take away and start working on right away. And again, congratulations on to you coming up, and to your son as well for getting his belt over the weekend.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I loved our chat. Thank you.
Yeah. So long, everybody. And sign up next week. We've got Tableau legend Chuck Hooper. So take a look at the website. Bye for now.
Oh, nice.